as we get going, let's talk about BIM modeling and how it sort of fits into the big picture. Hopefully you have Revit in some version. On these workstation machines, it's probably Revit 2012 still. If you're on your own machine, it's probably Revit 2013. The distinction between those two will be very minor. You won't notice any difference for anything we're doing over the next couple of days. The differences are kind of more around the edges or maybe features. So the origin of all this, let's start back with that. And where we got started going with BIM modeling was that we've always needed ways to communicate, our design ideas to ultimately people who are going to collaborate with, ultimately people who are going to build them. Okay. So what happens is, if you go way back in time, people would build things like this. You build physical models. Okay, so you have master builders who, working for the pharaoh, would go ahead and lay out what it is they were going to build, and we built a nice 3D model of it. And pharaoh would approve and say it kind of looks pretty good. And then when it was time to actually work with it, they would all use this really as the base reference for really what it is. It's sort of the design record, and ultimately it's the construction docs too, what's going on. We do it all through a 3D model. The nice thing about the 3D modeling is, well, one really good thing that happens is in having to construct a 3D model, even though it's at a funny scale, we actually have to resolve a lot of issues that ultimately would come up in the building the process. That really, how that connection is going to work, how the joinery is going to work. You really have to understand it when you go with a 3D model. You have to kind of really get to how it's going to physically be built. Okay. The limitation of this is, I can't really share this very well. I've got one. You have to come see me when you want to kind of scale off it and measure it. Hopefully you got what you needed. When you go out to the site and you need to work with it, if you didn't get the information, you might have to come back and measure again. But it's pretty limited because we only have this. I can't fax it to you. I can't email it to you, all those kind of things. It's just sort of here. So it's a great way to get started, but it had a real sort of efficiency problem. And out of that, back in Renaissance times, the whole notion of actually doing orthographic projections of a model was born. You'd actually be able to go ahead and take that and reduce it to different 2D views. So great, the architects that day figured out that you could say, okay, if I want to describe this, how can I do it effectively? If you look at it dead on like that, you start thinking about what a roof plan or a floor plan might look like in a space. And that could be an elevation, and that could be an elevation, and that could be an elevation. We can cut sections and do all these things. And really, we've been doing it that way for the last 400 years in terms of doing all these orthographic projections and other things. And orthographic projections are kind of a cool way of operating. It takes a 3D object and makes it down to a sort of a 2D representation of the object, but the disadvantage is it's a little bit of an abstraction and it may not actually resolve. And I think you see this an awful lot if you've been working on site and you've ever had to deal with plans that don't really add up in a way that are physically buildable. You sort of know what this problem is. We can draw things in 2D that, because we're not actually having to resolve things in 3D, aren't physically buildable. In fact, it's real easy to come up with all sorts of examples. For example, okay. So here's my little dollhouse view. That's my front view of the house or something like that. Okay, what does the side of the house look like? Okay, and a lot of people, okay, I'm clever here. It's not a hip roof. Oh, it must be doing this. Whatever's going on like that. But there's nothing to say that it's not doing that. You really can't tell from that view really what's happening in the other view. If I give you enough 2D views, hopefully you'll be able to resolve it all away. But what happens is, it turns out this is pretty tough. And as trained engineers and designers, you're pretty good about figuring out how all those 2D views resolve into 3D views. But the truth is, clients aren't very good at that. And a lot of times the people who have to build things aren't really good at taking, well, there's the detail on sheet 3 that corresponds to the plan view and the call out on sheet 12. And you start putting that all together, and somehow people get really confused because it's just really hard to resolve that stuff together. That's asking an awful lot. So what has happened is, out of the world of 2D drawing, what's happened through the years is we've had to have more and more views. We started creating bigger and bigger plan sets. Like, way back when, I could show you sets of house plans that are really drawn on one sheet of linen or on like one sheet of almost like sketch paper or something like that. We built entire houses like that 30, 40 years ago. Nowadays, if I'm going to go ahead and build a house and submit it in the city of San Jose, there's a minimum of, say, 35 sheets that are involved, full of a little bit of everything. So it's the floor plans, it's the sections, the elevations, it's all the drainage, and storm impact, we do all sorts of random stuff like floor docks, a lot of stuff that goes in there. Like, so have you maybe been working, commercially in construction for the past several years? Like on some buildings? Okay. So as you're doing that, like, what kind of building were you building?
Residential. Custom residential.
Okay, so how big were your plan sets?
It's very thin. It's pretty loose.
You're actually pretty good then. Yeah. Anyone in big commercial buildings? Yeah. So like, how big was that plan set?
We had one of 7 lines. So about 1,500 pages.
About 1,500 pages? Okay. So picture, if you will, in those 1,500 pages, like it's hard enough to sort of find the information you need, let alone coordinating all the information you need. And that's really sort of, what really drove a lot of the need to create sort of BIM models is, as we went ahead and sort of really started multiplying and got more people involved and needed to collaborate on putting together the building, the first thing that came up was CAD, and CAD was actually pretty good. Okay. Within computer-aided drafting or design, depending on what you want to think about it as, it was a pretty good notion for its time. It was at least this idea that, hey, if I'm going to go ahead and be drawing an awful lot, if I could actually just sort of take this little guy, which is the window, and draw it once, then save it away as a block or something that I can copy and paste around, that there'd be some efficiency. I could take that thing and then I could paste it in over here, and really I wouldn't have to draw it twice. CAD was all really about drawing efficiency. It was copying and pasting, making reusable elements. Okay. Very, very cool. It really did improve things that way. It allowed us to create hundreds of pages without having to kind of worry about it nearly as bad in terms of having to hand draft all those things. The problem is, though, in terms of doing CAD, there's really no smarts built into those things. We can go through and say, hey, those lines, okay, they're not just lines. I know, we'll give them some intelligence. I'll say, let's go ahead and put them on a layer. And I'll say, I'm going to put those on the window layer. Okay, so now everyone will clearly know that this series of lines represents a window. Again, we can turn it on and turn it off and kind of negotiate it with it as on a layer by layer basis. Yeah, it was better than nothing. It was actually gave us a little bit of information. But the problem is later on, as we're going through and looking at it, and I got a floor plan view which sort of corresponds to that. There's some window in here that somehow is in that same location as the door right here. So much my 3D drawing. I'm drawing quickly. Okay, if we go through and we take that and we go ahead and remove that, or we move it over 2 or 3 inches, or whatever it is we're going to do to it, there's nothing in the CAD system that's really going to give it the intelligence to say that, hey, this series of lines and this series of lines actually represent the same object, and that anything we do to one of them should affect all the other ones. There's really no relationship. They're just dumb lines in the scheme of things. And really, it's the notion of how we could go ahead and improve on that really led to the whole notion of doing BIM. The idea that we could go ahead and create a single model, create a digital version of that 3D model, and be working with everything in that single 3D model, and then really let each of these different views, the elevation view, the floor plan view, the end view, whatever it is, the views, let those all really just be cameras on the model so that if you operated on the model anywhere, all the different camera views would reflect the changes automatically. So BIM was really all about coordination. And really where it came from, or where we really got the efficiency, was that as opposed to a series of lines, it was really all that we were going to be creating really a building model. Where everything we put down isn't a series of lines, it's actually understood as being a building element. So it is understood as being a wall, a door, a window, and all these different views will render that object in a way that's appropriate for that view, but it really is a single object. If we change anywhere, we'll change everywhere. Okay, so let's go ahead and experience that ourselves relative to a building model by doing this. Let's go ahead and open, if you can, on your machine. I'm going to open up something called, for me, it's called the Sample Architectural Project. I think on some of yours, the newer ones, it says Basic Architectural Sample. It's, no, you'll find it actually if you say, if you're looking at the splash screen here, with openings, it'll probably be the last thing that's open because we were working with in the last class. If you can't find it, I'll show you where you can find it out there on the file server or even on your local machine. But basically see if you can open up the sample project. If you go to the open menu, oops, hang on, let me do this. Let me go to the application menu because that'll actually show you the last few things that got opened. You should find something that says something like Basic Sample Project. See if you can open that up. Okay, and pull that up on your screen and we'll take a look at it. Okay, looking good. Application menu. Okay, no worries. If you can't find it in there, let us do it. You just install it. Okay, if you can't find it there, let me show you where you do find it. If you've never opened it in the past or hasn't been on your screen, you can say open, and we'll say open a project. And here's where you're going to navigate to it. It's under, in the C, it's under Program Files, Autodesk, Revit 2013, and finally Samples. Although, let me do this. Since we're supposed to be good about this, let me open it. I'm going to save it out on the L drive. So in case you sort of are missing it somewhere else, we could all be working with the same one. Let me do a save as project. I'll go ahead and put that out on the L drive, so if anyone wants to pick it up out there, they can do that too. So L drive. And where I store things in here, I'll say like BIMBootcamp 2012. I'll say, oh, let's call it class handouts. And I'll just put it in Monday 1. And I'll put it in there. So Revit Basic Sample Project. So if you're having trouble finding it, you can download it from there. Okay, so most people have that file? Good? Okay, great. Let's take a look at this for just a second. My screen looks a little bit different than your screen, and I'll get that fixed here in a second. And we'll talk about the difference. Looks like I closed something up. Okay, when you open Revit for the first time, yes?
Mine says the file was saved in a later version of Revit. It's not receiving.
That is, hey, you're pulling it off the L drive?
Yeah.
No worries. That's because I'm working in 2013 for you. Let's go the other way, where you go to open, you go see program files, and pull the Revit 2012 one. I'm sorry, I'm sort of, yeah. For the people who are working on the desktop workstations, you could run into that. So for you, go, it's under open. Okay, it's again C, program files, Autodesk, and then for you, it's going to be like Revit Architecture 2012. Under program, then finally samples. Long way to get there, but you're going to look for the basic sample project. That one should take you to the same place. Okay, so let's go and get going with some very basic Revit operations. Yes?
Is there a reason, like on the website, we're taking extraordinary long time to load that model up?
That shouldn't be. That's interesting. As you just open it and...
Yeah.
Well, that's like... Don't know what's going on. Helps me to get like
She's 40.
That should be fine in terms of what's going on. I see the little green bar there now. You just...
Okay.
Yeah. Is it typing all going on? Okay. Well, we'll get all these computer hassles figured out pretty quickly. Let's talk about setting up Revit the way you want it to look. Now, people, when you open up Revit, there's a couple of ways that it might look. Typically, when you open it up, it looks more like this. Let's see if I can kind of put it back the way it was. Because this is not the way I like it, but it's the way it typically comes out of the box. What happens is a couple big regions you want to know about up here. There is the ribbon, where most of the different tools you'll be working with, floating right up top. And there's different tabs to the ribbon. We can choose different tabs and different tools to show up. And that whole Microsoft ribbon interface. There's something called the Properties palette, which will show us the properties of anything we select. And there's also these views, all these different, the browser for all the different layers and views and things that we want to look at down here. There's also some tools that are kind of quick access tools down here, which really affect what's happening in the drawing area right here. Now, my machine is actually sort of very squishy right now because I only have 1024 by 768 to keep it all on the screen and project it. So what I tend to do, and you see this on the machine, don't be freaked by it, it's just sort of what I like to do to kind of make myself, give myself a little more space is, I'll take the Properties palette and I'll drag it over to the right-hand side. Okay, and the main reason I like doing that is I can now see more of the Properties palette and see a little bit more of the browser too. So it's just really a matter of personal choice. You don't have to do it that way. If you do want to do it that way, it just sort of gives you the ability to see more of what's going on with two different windows. If not, you should be stuck over here. So as you look at the drawing area, let's stop and think about what's actually showing around out there. There is a 3D model, or 3D building model that kind of illustrates the basic house here. And as you start looking at that model, there's a number of ways we can start interacting with it. Let's just give you some ways to interact in Revit as a starting point. So for example, one thing you can do is there's this little thing up here called the View Cube. And if you click on one of the corners of the cube, it'll orbit around. So go ahead and try that. Try clicking on different corners, maybe with the lower corner. You can also click on the sides if you want to. And as you go clicking on those different sides and corners, you might notice that we're actually rotating through an awful lot of the different views that you might think of. That's kind of like the left side elevation. That's kind of like the front elevation, and what I think it was the front of the house. If I click on the top, I'll get sort of a top view. All we're really doing is moving a camera around, kind of looking at all the different corners. That's one way to kind of interact with this. Okay, there's other ways that are more efficient. If you want to ever get back to this view, you kind of from the upper right-hand corner, you put the little house stuff. That will take you back there very quickly. So no matter where you are, if you click on the little house, it'll take you to what's called the home view. A little off the screen, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay, next up, as you're looking at this view, you may be saying, well, hey, that view's kind of small and squishy. I'd like to zoom it up, or I might need to pan it around. I might change my view a little bit. Let's give you some other ways to do that. Okay, as you're thinking about working with that view, you might want to zoom in or zoom out. So a couple of different ways of doing that. There's a little palette full of tools here that give us the ability to zoom in or zoom out. I can say zoom to fit, or what I'll do here is I'll choose zoom in on a region. And I can kind of just zoom in on right down that lower corner. So you can zoom by choosing the little zoom tool over here. But let me give you a shortcut that you may like better. If you happen to have a mouse, okay, with a wheel on it, that's one way to do this. If you go through and you roll up or down on the wheel, so as I roll up or I roll down, I'm kind of zooming in and zooming out. Something else you can do is, there's the notion of panning. And for panning, you can think about this as I want to pan around the view. I could go ahead and pull these thumbs up and down. We'll pull this one and go left and right. And that's kind of okay to get started with. But if I'd like to pan a little more fluidly, you could also do this. If you have a mouse, you can actually hold down the button on the mouse. Hold it up there. And then I can pan left or right. What I'm doing is I'm just holding in the button as opposed to rolling the button. I'm pushing in on the wheel. Okay? You can do the panning that way. Now, a lot of us are on laptops and we don't have buttons we don't have mice with wheels on them and stuff like that, or you may not have that same functionality. So there's another way to do this, which is actually what I tend to do it more often than not now, is to use something about the steering wheel, and you'll find it, it's actually right over here in the front. It's like that, it looks right like this. And if you choose the steering wheel, here's what it does. Okay, I'll put my little magic mouse down over there. I'll choose the steering wheel, and we have this little guy. So the steering wheel kind of follows my mouse around. But the nice thing is the steering wheel has a lot of different functionalities built into it. One of which is I could pan or orbit or zoom. And the way it works is if you hover over the word pan, that part turns green. If you mouse down now, you're going to be using panning functionality. If you hover over the word zoom and it turns green, if you mouse down now, it'll be zooming instead. Or another really good one to sort of play around with that I use an awful lot is orbiting. If you hover over the word orbit and mouse around, they'll start to pivot it around. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and play with those for just a second. As we're doing that, I'm talking about what else you can do. If this thing is stuck to you and you want to get rid of it, because you no longer want to be working with that, a couple ways you can do it. One is you can hit the little, there's an X right there at the upper right-hand corner, and that'll sort of close it up. Another way you can do is just Shift W, which is for wheel. Just really close it, or Shift W will make it appear or make it disappear. Now, as you're orbiting, can you tell what your model is orbiting around? Can you see where the pivot point is? Okay, if you would like to change that, because very often you don't want it to be pivoting around whatever point it is currently set to, what you can do is actually choose the center mode, and then basically drop the center of your universe on whatever you want the pivot point to be. So for example, if I say center, and I go dropping it, I'll just put it right on top of the roof in the middle. Okay, now when I orbit, that'll be the center of my rotation. Or if I want to, for example, pivot around that front patio, I can drop it on the patio. And now when I'm orbiting, I'm moving around that. So all we're really doing here is we've got a model here, we're just moving a camera around the model. In terms of changing its zoom, changing its pan, changing sort of where you do it, the camera's position relative to where the targets. That's all this kind of camera's like. But let's talk about what we can actually do with the model. That's where it gets a lot more interesting. So, for example, right now I'm looking at this 3D view, and that's looking pretty good. How about this? Let's go ahead and open up a floor plan view. Let's open up a different view at the same time. So I'm going to go to the floor plan in the browser, double click on level 1. I'm looking at the floor plan view. Okay. This is really another view of the same model. It's really the same underlying model, as a different camera position on it. Let's do this. So you can sort of see that it actually is the same model. We're going to open up both the views so we can see them at the same time. And how you can do that is under the View tab, you'll find something called Tiling the Windows. So if you go to the View tab, you say Tile the Windows, or if you like keyboard shortcuts, you just type WT for Window Tile. That'll actually bring them up to you. Now, depending upon how many windows you already have open, they'll all sort of get tiled. You might have to close some. Looks like I still have a 3D view. I got a couple different views in here. I'm going to close one of those and do the tile again, just so I'm looking only the two of them. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this and sort of see if we can understand how these things all relate together. Over here, let me pan that one in too. So here's the deal. I'm looking at two different views of my model right now. I got this nice exterior 3D view. It's kind of hanging around on the outside. I got this first floor plan view. It's hanging around right here. The floor plan view is basically just a camera in the model located above level 1, looking down at 4 feet above. So picture cutting through at 4 feet and looking down. Okay, that's how we're generating the floor plan view. Okay, so all these things say floor plan views. It's either a camera at level 1 looking down, level 2, we just moved up to level 2 and we're looking down, level 3, we're just moving up, we're always looking down. Ceiling plan views, same basic idea, although as opposed to looking down 4 feet, we're looking up. And this one is out. So it's always the camera that's cut looking in one direction or the other. Okay, you might even sort of wonder about these elevation views. Where are they? Literally, this camera is on the outside of the building, kind of looking in. So really, all these things, the important thing to think about, they're not really separate drone views, they're really just cameras looking at the models from different perspectives. Okay. Some of which are orthogonal. We're going to learn about perspective ones. Some are giving you perspective. But it's all these different cameras operating around the model. And the important thing about that gives it so much power is that if you choose any element in the model, you're actually changing it in all the views simultaneously. Probably the easiest way to see that is if I, for example, choose that door. It's a real easy one to spot. So anyways, I just went over that door and I kind of selected it. I didn't select it. You. There we go. Selected it. And let's check out everything that happened. I selected the door in the 3D view. If we go in blue, you might notice that over here in the floor plan view, it's also selected right now, indicating that it really is the same object that's here. You might also notice that over the properties palette, there's also information about the door being presented. So this is floor plan rendering, 3D rendering, and it's the actual data, the database information about that door. It's on level 1, it's 0 off the floor right now, it has a certain type over there. And we're really just looking at 3 different pieces of information. This door also has a mark. It has a door number 8. So if we look at it in the door schedule, that's door number 8 right now. We can change that information if we want to. So the idea is as follows. If we want to change that door in any view, it doesn't really matter which view we do it in. All we need to do is, for example, let me change the sill height. This is a model that's in millimeters, so let me say that it's going to be 2,000 millimeters off the floor. I'll apply that. And when I do, notice what happens. The door moves up over here in the 3D view. The door actually seems to disappear in the floor plan view. Okay. It's showing up over here in this view just fine. Okay. Over here, I kind of did what I expected. I moved up 2 meters, it moved up 2 meters for me. What about that floor plan view? Like, why did it disappear? What can make it go away?
It's level 1.
Back.
And then you're in the level 2.
Actually, if I went up to level 2, we probably spot it. You're actually correct. Yeah. What happens is, on level 1, since we're at level 1, and level 1 is cut 4 feet above the ground looking down, since I'm now at 2 meters, it's actually above us. Okay, so you're right. If I went to level 2, it's actually high enough now that it would be intersecting that. In fact, you want to go to level 2 and confirm. I bet it is then. Let's zoom on in and see. That's interesting. I see it's almost the ghost of it because I can see that little change thing. That's interesting. It doesn't think that it's actually there. Oh, you know what it is? It's because although it's poking up into level 2, its top isn't quite at 4 feet above level 2 just yet. So let me try shoving that up just a little bit higher. What if I change that up to like 3 meters up? Oops, not 3 millimeters. I'm bad about working in metric. Okay, there we go. Now it rightfully popped up to level 2, which is where it's going on. But what's going to happen is the views are always going to change just so reflect the model information, and floor plans, the elevation, sections, all those things are going to just really automatically be generated based on the information about the model, hopefully doing the right thing. I'm going to go ahead and put that back down again at 0. Let's try some other things in terms of playing around with that. For example, let me close up level 2. Oh, I'm going to even zoom in over here on that floor plan view. It's going to really pay attention to that door. If you take that door and you want to do things like move it, you can do that just by dragging it. Let me move it way over here up by the windows. Okay. Notice it also is going to move in the 3D view. If I go ahead and move it on down to the other end, I can move it over there. It's going to change again in the 2D view, or in the 3D view, as well as in any elevations you might have open right now. Okay. Other Other things we can do, for example, choose that door. Once you've gone ahead and created the door, let's go ahead and choose it. You'll see it has a certain amount of smarts to it. Now for a double door, there's really not a whole lot you can change as an object. One thing you do is change whether it's flipping in or whether it's flipping out. This really is an in-swing or an out-swing door. If you want to make that change, you can just click those little, it's called a glyph, and it'll swap it in. Now, it doesn't look very different on the outside. If there were two different materials, an interior material, an exterior material, or different types of trim on the inside and the outside, that would be switching too. That would be all contained in the object. If we want to switch doors around, double doors allow us to do that. Let's try changing to a different type of door. What if, for example, you want to change it to a single door, like a single glass door or a single flush door? Let's make it a single door. You notice a single door actually has one more degree of kind of a variable you can change. That's just the hinging direction. So we can not only have it swing in or swing out, we can also kind of flip which side it hinges to. Again, not very interesting in terms of the 3D view right now, because this door is actually fairly symmetric, so you can't see the difference there. But you can make that sort of change. Other things you can do are, for example, change to a different type of door. Make it a flush door. Now it's a solid door instead. Or I could even go through and change it to be more of like a bifold door. Okay, or like a closet door. Which again may not be a very sensible thing, but let's talk about sort of like the limits of BIM modeling. For the most part, the BIM modeling tool, Revit, just all by itself, it'll let you go ahead and make nonsensical assumptions. You can go ahead and put a closet door on the outside of the building. It's not going to say, hey, you need to put a fire-rated door that's secure and all those things. We could go ahead and run a tool on your model after the fact to verify that the doors you have on the exterior wall are actually good exterior doors, or that doors don't swing into each other, that we have good clearances for ADA. There's all those things we can do. The modeling tool itself won't tend to fight you on these things. It'll let you do things that aren't necessarily the most sensible. You can always go ahead and say, hey, analyze this and tell me if I'm making sensible assumptions. But you'll even find that as you're doing your modeling, there's a lot of times where you do things temporarily that don't necessarily make sense because you're halfway through the middle of an editing operation, and it'll let you do that. But just because you did it in the BIM model doesn't guarantee that it's buildable, doesn't guarantee that it's structurally sound, any of those things. It's just going to model your design intent. Then you can ask it to check your design intent later. So watch out for that. It will let you do things like either put doors that don't necessarily belong there. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to put the door so it overlaps the curtain wall somewhere. Okay, it'll let me do that. Yeah. We can go through and do some interference checking to say, are there any doors that are overlapping with windows? But as a starting point, it'll let me do that. Okay, in terms of other things you can do with this stuff, what else can we do? Let's go ahead and start changing things like, doors. I've been playing around with that door an awful lot. It has different type properties. Let's go ahead and choose that wall. For example, here's this wall. If we choose the wall, you'll sort of see that it has some sort of basic, looks like corrugated, some sort of wall in there. If I want to change its properties, again, I can go through and just go pull down under the type palette. Now let's make that a brick wall on metal studs. Okay, I'm not sure if you noticed there. Let me come back over here. Okay. We actually have a lot of layers to that wall now. We have the interior core, we have some airspace, and actually have the brick out there too. If I choose that wall and I say, no, I don't really want it to be brick on metal stud. I just want it to be, what else do I have in here? Not very much in here. Translucent wall. That'll probably be very skinny. Kind of some sort of translucent plasticky acrylic material. Some generic wall of this thickness, or like a concrete wall. Okay, we can go through and change the different properties. What's going to happen is, as we go through and operate it on as a building element, floor plan representation, the elevation representations, all those things are going to keep on updating appropriately. So the idea is what we really want you to be thinking about as you're doing your design is thinking about building true building elements and really handle the graphic. So it actually does a very good job of doing the representation for you. And really, we're more concerned with the elements themselves and the information about the elements, not how they graphically render it. Because really, if you think about where this is all going, we still today think about all these things ultimately ending up on a series of sheets that are printed out either as a phone book that's going out to your site, or as a couple sheets that are going out to your site for people to build in the field. But where this is going over the next 2 years is more and more, it's delivery online for things like iPads and like just Galaxy tablets or immersive augmented reality environments. There's a lot of cool research that's going on about how we get this information out to the field to have people actually work with and build with it. It doesn't involve putting it on paper. Because think about it, paper is the weakest link in this whole scenario because as soon as I print that out, you take that sheet of paper off the printer, I guarantee you someone in here has made a change to the model, and this is out of date, like immediately. It's as quicker than I can take it off, that model is out of date. So the idea is to give people live access to data and have you working with that way. So we want good 3D models where the paper is really more a byproduct as opposed to the focus of what we're doing. Okay, that's where we're going with all this. Okay, in terms of this model, let's kind of take a look at a couple more things we can do with it. We've been playing around just a little bit in terms of these floor plan views, things like that. Let's take a look at some of the other views. For example, as we're going through and thinking about how things are going to be built, these architectural views are kind of cool, but it's often nice to have sections and details and some of those things that are coming out of the models here. And if we want to go through and generate those, there's a couple that have already been created, but we're going to go ahead and just kind of create some of our own so you can sort of get more of a sense of how that looks. I'm going to close the 3D view for a second. I'm going to expand up that floor plan view. What I'm doing there, I said I was zooming out. Z-O is what I was just doing there. But another way to do it would be, say, zoom to fit, or you can roll the mouse, either way. But we got our building here, and let's think about this. If you've done a lot of work in AutoCAD or your graphic system, you might remember that, cutting sections and getting all the elements to show up right, or even doing 3D perspectives is pretty hard. That's actually where we spend a lot of time doing these like floor plans and elevations, but some views are harder to generate than others. Okay. In a building model, if you would like to go through and create a new section, it looks like this. Okay. Go through in tabs, and find the E tab, and then we're going to find the section tool. The section tool is what we're going to use to cut it. If I would like to cut a section of the building, go back to the view again. Section tool. We have a couple different things in here. We're just going to go ahead and think about, I'm going to try drawing a section that goes left to right, the length of the building, as opposed to across the building. If I want to draw that section, I can just draw it through. We'll put a little section marker in there. If that section's not quite where I want it, I can drag it around a little. Let me say, how about if I put it through the stairway? Stairways are always good things to draw sections through because that's where we're going to do an awful lot of trouble. So I can draw a section. This section is currently facing towards the top. If I want to change that, I can click on this little arrow. They'll flip it over so it'll face the bottom of the building as opposed to the top, or the left or the right, if you want to think about it that way. You can also control really how far you want that section to go. For example, right now it's going all the way through the building. If I want to have kind of a very narrow slice, I can just sort of limit it so it's only cutting a small piece of the building in terms of what the depth of the section is. But when I say that I have that section, it actually has added a new section for us right down here at the bottom of the list. That's section 3. And if you double click it, you'll see we actually have a section of the building right now kind of showing that stairway. Let me zoom on in that a little bit so we can actually take a closer look. Now, this section view is, again, a live view. It's another view on the model. There's nothing kind of special going on here. It's very much like the elevations and the other views. So if, for example, I want to change something about the stairway or change these doors or change the windows, you start to see some of those structure in here. And we can do that. It works just the same in this view as it does in the other views. So for example, if I want to get rid of one of those windows or move that window so it's not over on the far left-hand side of the bedroom, but they're more paired up in the middle, I can do that in the section view. Maybe get rid of the bed in this, or maybe in this one, as opposed to being a bed, let's go ahead and make it a sofa. Okay, we've made those changes in the section view. The nice thing is, if I go back to the floor plan view, you see those same changes are happening here. I got those two windows kind of paired up in the middle, and that's now a sofa in there instead. No, I don't like that so much. I'll go ahead and put it right back in the center of the wall, more or less. Okay, and now if I go back to that section, you'll see it's changing there. So you have complete interconnection and coordination between things. The nice thing is, if really all of our different drawings are really generating out this model, all 1,000 sheets of them, okay, if you change it here, you're actually just changing everything. So every section, call out, anything that's happening that's related to that now is kind of kind of completely coordinated. So it's hard to have things that are sort of like not working together. We also go through and do things like call out and start doing construction details out of a view like this. So for example, this has like little pieces of structural elements in here. If I really want to start looking at this in more detail, I can do something called a call out where I say, you know, this connection right in here is quite interesting to me. I put a little call out there. I can just double click on the head of it. There's more like the construction detail in terms of what's going on. Kind of a funny scale right now. Oh, I gotta think about which way is which here. Make it a little bit bigger. We can start actually getting quite precise about the relationships between every layer of the subfloor, the finished floor, and then have a wall all work together. This isn't a wood frame wall, but it was. It actually starts seeing all those things a little more closely. Or a very nice thing we can start doing is, like, I got a nice little 2D detail there. That's actually looking pretty good. But if I really wanted to explain it to someone, even these 2D details are a little bit abstract for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have a very good time, you know, kind of understanding how these 2D details work together. So what you can do is go back to your 3D view and say, hey, if I right click on this, and don't worry if you don't catch this right now, we'll show you how to do this again a little bit. We can say orient it to the same as the call out. Let me zoom on in there and show you what it did. So we now actually have a little 3D detail that shows how that stuff connects together. Okay, we can start annotating that and putting dimensions on it and things like that. The cool thing is, it's really all just sort of buried alive in the model. You change things in the model, you know, everything will sort of relate to each other. Even things like, oh, let's see what's going on with the stairway here. Do you have very many choices? We'll do open treads. Okay, slightly different stairway construction. I'll change it back over to one that has the stringer on the side. As you change things, the cool thing is it's changing in all of these. It's changing in all out these things. Just, can you show me the call out? Sure, no worries. How that works is callouts work either on plan views or on section views. Let me go back to the section view. We'll do a different one. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go to a different corner. How about right at the top of the stairs here, something like that. If I choose the callout tool, I can just highlight the area that I want to see in more detail. Now, that's just sort of a graphic symbol. Here it is. You might want to go ahead and pull that up just so we're looking at it so it's kind of hanging out a little bit better. But now it is actually showing down here. I can either double click on the head to get there, or I can select it in the browser, either way. But there now is that view. Shade it, or realistic, or whatever it is that I want to do there. But I can apply the real materials to it and kind of really see what it's like. Or go ahead and take a look at it in 3D. So there it is with the real materials, with concrete in the background and like a looking at stair treads right there. Now, any of these views, I should comment about that. Typically when we're going through and showing them, we use this sort of notion of really just a hidden line view. let me show you where I'm going right now. Down here at the bottom of the window, for the views, you can choose kind of your level of detail. You can also choose show me a wireframe, show me hidden line. Hidden line being sort of a simpler view. It's kind of a black and white hidden line view. I can shade it if I want. Shade it giving me the color, but not actually the material rendering. Okay. Or if you go one step further and push it, you can say, actually show me realistic. And realistic will then go back and say, okay, what is the actual photorealistic quality of that material? And kind of show it to you that way. And that actually works for any of the views. So for example, you might remember we created that view over there. If I wanted to go through and make that photorealistic, see if I do it. Actually, it did do it. Hang on, it's there. Can you see there? You get a sort of sense of the board and batten and whatever the material is in the deck and all that kind of stuff. It's trying to like make that look a little bit better. Yes? So once you have a call out, for example, we got this call out here. Okay, let's be good about this. Let's give it a name so we'll really be able to sort of spot it better. So here's call out 2 of section 3. That's that guy here. I'm going to go ahead and just do that or give that a rename. I'll do that by just right-clicking on it and saying we're going to change its name, because we should be, we're going to be good about giving things proper names so you can find them later. So rename. I'm just going to call this the top of stair detail. And again, I can put that on a sheet just like this. As the, I should add some dimensions to it or something like that. But if you'd like your 3D view to be oriented so it is that same orientation as what you see here, what you do is you go to the 3D view, and it's a little hidden. It's kind of a real weird little feature, but if you right-click on this, you can say orient this to a view, and then choose that call out. And what it'll do is it'll take the the positioning, it'll take the sectioning, and just where the bounds are. It'll make it all so it matches the same with that detail. So I can say section top of stair detail. See what happened here. There we are. Now in this view, it's still looking relatively flat. It's a 3D view, but it's sort of like flattened out because it's sort of oriented that way. But now that it's a 3D view, I can orbit it. And maybe I'll pan that up so you can sort of see it better. So now I have more of that kind of 3D view of what's going on. So what we're going to be doing really over the next couple sessions is we're just going to spend a lot of time learning how to model all these different elements. We're going to look at walls and doors and windows and getting all those things, figure out about roofs and floors. Floors are very easy to do. Roofs you'll find are a little bit, all the elements we create. Roofs are actually typically one of the most complicated elements. Just because you can think about them, there's a whole lot of interesting geometry that has to resolve together, and everything's at a slope. There's a lot of complexity behind roofs if you look around. The good news is it happens pretty automatically, but you find roofs are one of the trickier things we do. We're going to look at stairs, curtain walls, like all the different elements. But the idea is really, over the next 2 days, to really go through all the different types of elements you might need to put into a building model, okay? So that we can then start thinking about the structural elements and the mechanical elements, and then ultimately think about how to do this more of a construction model to be built. And so it's all going to start with just learning how to kind of create all these first elements so you can work with these things. Now, in this, you might note that we have this kind of funny thing going on where we have like this little micro view and we have a 3D view, and it's looking pretty good in terms of what we want to see here. Yeah, if we take a look at that section view, and there's section 1 and section 2, the long views of the building, you might say, well, hey, okay, these little micro views are pretty good. Can I actually get a section 3D of the entire building? Because that would actually be very useful for understanding how this thing's going to get built. And the answer is yes, that same technique we've been using will work for you there too. I can say, let's go to the 3D view. Orient this to view. And if I really orient it to section 2 or section 1, it'll actually give us the full building. Let me zoom that out a little bit so you can see it. And then when you orbit that around, you got a pretty good 3D view of what's going on. Let me save this away. Actually, I'm going to do a save as, so I don't actually wipe out the original one. And I'll put that down there. So we can go ahead and kind of create 3D views like this in terms of like, you know, even entire building sections, so we can start to see the structural elements, what the foundation area has to look like. Really start seeing the bigger beam elements at the top, the railings, all those things. So we can start thinking about construction. Now, all this graphical playing around is kind of cool in its own right, but don't go ahead and forget about actually the numerical information that's available in here too. For example, as we go looking at all these things, you can choose anything like that piece of structural framing. I can see that, again, these are sort of metric dimensions, so it's a lot, it's like a 2x8, something like that. You can count the total number of 2x8s that are in here and start thinking about what our materials quantity lists has to look like. We have all these doors and windows, and we can start thinking about doors and window schedules to kind of add all that information up. And let's just kind of show you how that works too. Because that numeric side of it is just as important as all this graphical having fun. On the numeric side, how this works is any of the information we'd like to pull it and kind of have it available to us in more of a scheduled tabular form is we can go into the view menu. And under the view menu, we can choose, of all these different views, there's 3D views. We can also go through and choose a schedule view. And we can choose what we want to schedule. For example, let me go ahead and just make a schedule of all the doors during the project right now. That might be an easy one to get started with. So I'm just going to grab a schedule of all the doors. I'll say, let's get the doors. I get to choose which different things I want to see about the doors. And for right now, how about if I show, let me go ahead and show what level they're on, level 1 or level 2. I'm going to choose the width of the door and the height of the door. I'll put that in there as a column, and I'll put height in there. I'll even put the type of the door. Okay, and the family. So let's see what that's actually good for. Now I'll reorganize this a little bit. Here's a schedule of all the doors that are in the house right now. Not very well organized because I haven't sorted it out at all, but I have all the different doors that are in there. Let's go ahead and I'll sort this out just a little bit. I'll sort it by level first. Then I'll say by family and then by type. Make a little order out of it. Okay, so what you can see right now is currently, what is it? There's 5 of these different doors, which are all this bifold 4-panel door, 1800 by 2100. Okay, and it's numerically right there. Or it's showing us right there what's going on. Let's go back to the 3D view and kind of show you that what happens is if I, for example, change one of these and make it instead of a bifold door, I'll make it a double glass door. Again, not going to be a very sensible thing to go put in front of our washer and dryer. But if I go back to that schedule now, you'll see now, as opposed to there being 5, there's only 4 of them, and there's the one double glass door there instead. So anything we put in there can really happen, 2 ways. Actually, let me even go and tile these windows together. Actually, I have a lot of windows right now. WT to tile all these. Maybe I can't tile them right now. Let's go view. I'm going to close up some of these. So here we are, we're looking at it both ways. This is really 2-way. I can say, let's go ahead and make that instead of a double glass door, let's make it a single flush door. It'll change there. Or I can say, let's go ahead and make it the bifold 4-panel again. Let me put it back in there. But you know, you have complete interconnection between tabular views and 3D views and all that stuff. That's all available. Okay, let's just kind of at this point stop and pause for a second. It's going to answer some questions. What's going to happen is when we come on back, when you guys come on back around 3:30, what we're going to do is basically go through and lead you through the exercise of creating your own building. We're working with someone else's building here, but lay down some walls, some doors, some windows, put a floor and a roof on it, and ultimately get those views onto a sheet. Okay, so you know, whirlwind through all the different steps, like when you come on that. But you know, before doing all that, just based on what we've been doing here, we're just going to play around with the model and sort of explore. And you know, questions that are coming up, or like, you know, what are you thinking as you see all this stuff? Okay. Any random questions? Yeah.
Can you repeat the part of the door?
Oh yeah. Oh, no worries. Yeah, when it comes time to create schedules, it looks like this. It's a separate view type. And when we want to create schedules, there's a whole little menu here all about creating schedules. Let me do this. I created a door schedule. I'm going to create a window schedule. It'll be very, very similar. Same sort of object. Well, I'll say, let's go to schedules. I get to choose what sort of thing I want to schedule. So I'm going to choose the windows. And it all starts with really what sort of fields you want to show. What are your column headings that you want to show? And what I put in there was I put the level, because I like to think about what floor things are on. Then I can put in there, I'll put the family and type. That's just kind of what type of window it is, like a casement or a double hung or whatever it is. I'll put in there, let's say, the rough width and the rough height, although let me go ahead and put in the true height. Rough width and rough height are often sort of separate data fields that aren't sort of the model dimension, but something you do relative to the model dimension to make sure you had allowed enough clearance on the outsides of them for them. So I'm going to put height, and I'm going to put width in there too. Let's see if any of those things are reported. Beautiful. I'm going to say let's just sort that by level. And here's what my window schedule looks like right now. Now, my window schedule is pretty boring because I have a lot of curtain wall in here as opposed to a lot of individual windows. But you can sort of see that of the different fixed windows in here, here are the ones that are available. And once we have the schedule, if you want to change things, you can. For example, if I want a window that's not quite as big, I can change it to a different size. And we've changed it there not only in the 3D model, I've actually changed it in the schedule. It's changed everywhere. So, you know, we can schedule anything. We're going to figure out that part. You know, those little guys over here, all those little pieces of white framing lumber? And we can schedule those too and sort of get like a cut list for everything we need. Yeah.
Why is it that the window showed up in the door schedule?
Oh, that's interesting. Is there a window showing up on your door schedule? It's quite possible. What you got?
There's a lot of windows. Pretty much all of them show up in the door schedule.
This is kind of interesting. Well, let's go ahead and window I. Come pull that out a little bit. I'm so curious because it's really somehow. Yeah, somehow whatever that window thing is, it must have the designation somewhere that it takes it from the door category. Or actually, I take that back. When you did it, did you say that you wanted to have multiple types? You can do that too.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, we're gonna like show you what I mean. With the whole view thing in the schedules, okay, there's this whole notion of a single schedule versus a multi-category schedule. Multi-category will let you get doors and windows together, or something like that if you just chose that one. So if you did that and then chose, I think that might be how you got the doors and windows together.
Yeah.
Okay, because typically what happens is like the doors will be filtered as doors, the windows will be filtered as windows, or windows will, whatever. I think you understand what I meant, even though I'm saying it backwards. Okay, and you sort of get things, kind of on the right schedules. Are there any questions? Things to think about? Because really what I would love to have you do in the next hour and a half, so I think you guys are great at getting your software installed and stuff like that, is go ahead, play around with this model in terms of trying different views, kind of try setting cameras, different places, move them around. Let me give you two other things you might want to play with. There's the whole notion of, let me go back to that 3D view. That is a 3D view right now. Zoom that out. There's another type of camera. These are all actually called orthographic cameras. They're non-perspective. These are all, if we actually measured 10 feet over here and these 10 feet over there, it would actually match up just the same. They're all like axonometric. Okay, if you want to create more of a perspective view, what you can do is go to any floor plan view, and there's another type of 3D view you can create called a camera view. Camera view is just basically let you place the camera somewhere outside the building or inside the building. Drag on out. And then that's going to give us a perspective view. Let me zoom on out a little bit so you can sort of see that better. I'm still pretty close to the building. You, stop that. Okay, even though we're looking at this in a camera view, the important thing to note, whether you're looking at it shaded or realistic, is all these elements are still active. For example, if I want to go through and make a change, for example, to that door or that wall type, I can still change that wall type.
Where's the camera view?
Okay, what you got to do is, I'm going to shoot another one because it'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to go to floor plan view, and then I'll say view, 3D view, and you'll find camera underneath it. Let me get one from this side, it may be easier. If you have a camera view and it's not quite pointing where you like it to, you might say, well, that's unfortunate, I got to sort of relocate the camera view, but there's a really nice tool to help you with that. And that steering wheel, if you're looking at it from a camera view, you'll find some really good tools called look and walk. They're in here, and up and down. Look lets you do this. Look basically says, hey, you've got the camera positioned someplace, let's just move your head around and look someplace else. So that is, head's in the same place, I'm just going to orbit around, you know, I'm just pivoting my head. Other things in there, up and down. Up and down is, okay, I'm staying in the same place, but I'm moving the camera like straight up and down. Okay? And if you want to try walk, that's another fun one. Walk is actually dollying around, so I can just start moving on in and walking around the building and wherever it is you want to go. Of course, that's a little discombobulated. Actually, another good one for you to know about in terms of being able to recover is rewind. Rewind lets you go back to previous views that you liked. So if you ever get your 3D view really out of whack, you can rewind it to be a different camera position. Take it back a little bit. So go ahead, play around with those. You know, play around with the notion of in this existing model, sort of what's happening over here and the properties tell it. And then if you want to start just heading ahead towards where we're going to be going after the break, what you guys got to do is, oh, even in here, like in the 3D view or in the floor plan view, start just creating things, because this is what we're going to be doing. It's really, what happens if you want to go through and get rid of that door and move this wall out to here, and if I go to the architecture tools, start placing some new walls. I don't necessarily want that big brick wall, I'll go for more like one of the interior partition walls. I'll put a wall from here to here, maybe over to there. I'll put a door in the wall. Just start playing around a little bit. This is definitely one of those things where you cannot go wrong. So just go ahead and start messing around with that, kind of playing with the model. Really, you can't go wrong. But just sort of start seeing if you can start manipulating this model around a little bit, start making changes. When we come on back, what we're going to do is create our own one from scratch. And it's not going to be an architectural beauty, but we'll go ahead and have walls, doors, windows, and a roof on it. And it's nothing you can call a basic building. Okay? Beauty. So why don't you go ahead and break for now, and come on back and see me at 3:30.